pissed. Hi lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Hermie and I'm very happy to have you here today. First of all, I want to do a massive shout out to Livia over at Livia Crafts and Books, who has put together this group of people that all have disabilities to do a collaboration video talking about their particular challenges and reading a book that positively shows some of these challenges. So thank you so much, Livia, for including me in this collaboration. As with a lot of people with a disability, disabilities tend to come in clusters. So someone that has one disability will probably have a collection of them, if you like, you know, a Pokemon gotta catch them all sort of situation. No, I'm joking. No one likes this stuff. Trust me. Okay, so I'm going to try and not be a goofball about this. I'm all serious. And yeah, so my particular set of challenges, I have some physical health challenges and I also have some mental health challenges. My physical health challenges are that I have CFS and fibromyalgia. And then I have some mental health and physical health. I also broke my leg severely, which has changed the way that I walk and things like that as well. I don't think that would be counted as a disability on its own, but coupled with the other challenges I have, it obviously complicates things. And then I also have some mental health challenges. I have major depressive disorder and I also have PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And I also have a diagnosis of BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. It can also be known as EUPD, which is emotionally unstable personality disorder. And it is that last diagnosis that I'm choosing to talk to you about today, mainly because I think that it is very negatively portrayed and people know very little about them. Personality disorders are usually connected with crime and violence and just all the negative things, which I am not any of them things. I am not a criminal and I am not violent. So yeah, I am choosing to talk about that today. I am nervous about it. I'm nervous because I never know how people are going to react to it. And I know myself, when I first had the diagnosis, I had a real hard time because partly because I wasn't expecting that diagnosis, but also because I also had a very negative viewpoint of what a personality disorder is, how it can affect people, and whether or not effectively what it can mean. Like, am I a good person or am I a bad person? And as someone who is, as I think a lot of people want to be, I want to be a good person. So it's not it's something that I really struggled with at first to get my head around and to understand that that having a personality disorder is just one element of who I am. And although it's a big element and it is very impactful in my life, that doesn't mean that I am a bad person. And actually, like it's like we hear of personality disorders talked about in relation to murderers and rapists and like the worst of the worst. But honestly, I think personally, I think that these people were already bad. Like they also have a personality disorder, yes, but I think the two just exacerbate each other. It doesn't automatically make you a bad person to have a personality disorder. And hopefully this video will help to show that. Hopefully I've been around in this community long enough that people have started to get to know me and understand sort of my motivations and goals and intentions, because I think they're all important things in the world, and we should hopefully treat each person on their own merits and not necessarily on what we think we should, based on what other people have experienced or what you've experienced with one individual. Ultimately, borderline personality disorder is characterised by significant challenges in emotional regulation. interpersonal relationships and self-perception. These are all aspects that I struggle with. I feel things very extremely. So if I feel angry, I'm very angry. If I feel sad, I'm very sad. There is no sort of middle ground with the feelings that I feel. I also really struggle with interpersonal relationships. I'm in my 40s and have very few friends outside of YouTube. I don't have any friends. I have one friend outside of BookTube at the moment, and it's been a long time since I've seen them. We don't talk regularly. That's no fault of them. That's me struggling with that kind of thing, and a lot of my struggles are based around me feeling like I'm bothering people, or that people aren't really that interested in me as a person, and therefore I'm sort of forcing myself on them by contacting. So I do struggle with that a lot. I do have rapidly shifting moods, and they're pretty intense. If I feel something, I feel it pretty intensely. So if I feel sad, I feel really, really sad. If I feel happy, I'm really, really happy. And that can probably be a little bit jarring and disconcerting for the people around me at times. I am medicated, which helps with that. I am currently on one mental health medication. I recently came off in the last few months. I was on two mental health medications. I recently came off one of them, which I'm very happy about. And although it's been a bit of a process to sort of acclimatise to feeling things a little bit more again, I am overall glad that I've been able to come off that medication. I will go back on it if I need to, or I'll try a different course of medication if necessary. But for now, I think I'm doing pretty well, and I'm obviously communicating with my psychiatrist to make sure that everything is as it should be, as much as possible. I do have a strong fear of abandonment. However, the fear of abandonment is secondary to fear of people putting up with me. So it's kind of, them two things conflict really quite heavily. It has taken me a long time. I said before, I'm in my 40s, to start figuring out who I am, my own identity, understanding and connecting with myself as a human, and understanding what makes up Hermie, kind of thing. Who am I, basically, that good old question. And I'm still working on it, and things still change, and things change about yourself over time anyway. And with intensive therapy, I have learned that that's okay, kind of thing, and that as much as it's a challenge and difficult, I'm not good at the change thing. It is something I can manage now. Okay, so BPD has 9 main traits, and you have to have at least seven of them traits in order to have a diagnosis of BPD, or at least in the UK, that's true. One of them being fear of abandonment, which I've already covered. Unstable relationships, I've already clarified that I struggle with that. Unclear or shifting self-image, tick. Impulsive and self-destructive behaviours. I am a pretty impulsive person, and I do have some self-destructive behaviours, and I also have some self-harm challenges. Self-harm is the next trait. Extreme emotional swings, I do deal with that. Chronic feelings of emptiness, I do often feel that one of the ways that the brain can protect itself during really tough times and traumatic times is to almost separate itself from the body in some ways. So I do have that feeling of watching things happen to me rather than experiencing things happen to me. And when I am overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, and sometimes just if I'm tired, my mind will do that just as a way to manage. That can be difficult because I'm not connected with how I'm feeling at all in them moments, and I'm not always aware of a lot of what's going on around me. This can also happen at any time. So I can be talking and it can happen. I can be sitting reading and it can happen. I can be driving and it can happen. The last one is explosive anger. Now this trait, I technically have this trait. However, through therapy, I've been able to manage it a lot more effectively. So it's rare to see this trait in me these days. When I was much younger, that was a different story. If you'd met me 20 years ago, it would have been a very it probably would have felt like a completely different person in a lot of ways that you had met back then. That's not to say I'm much better now or that I don't have this anymore. I do still have this. I've just learned how to manage it. Okay, let us get some reading done here. So, what book am I reading? Let me show you. I am reading The Monster and the Mirror by AJ Aiello. I don't know why I always put a K at the beginning of that. And this is a non-fiction book from KJ Aiello's experiences with severe mental illness, magic, and the stories we tell. So it goes from let me just read the back to you. Growing up, KJ was fascinated with the magical stories of dragons, wizards, and fantasy, where monsters were not what they seemed and anything was possible. These fictional worlds were both a balm and an escape, a safe space where the reality of KJ's struggle with mental illness would cease to be a burden and transform into a strength that could win battles and vanquish villains. A unique blend of memoir, research, and cultural criticism, The Monster in the Mirror charts KJ's life as they try to understand their own mental illness using the lore of The Lord of the Rings, The Haunting of Hill House, and many more as both guides to heroism and agency, as well as cautionary tales of mental illness, stereotypes of fear and violence. Who is allowed to be mad versus sane, good versus evil, weak versus strong, and who is allowed to tell their own stories in a system where so many are pushed into the margins? The Monster in the Mirror explores our perceptions of mental illness directly in a way that is challenging and tender, empathetic and knowledgeable, offering a path to deeper understanding and more compassionate care. So, this person doesn't have the same diagnosis as me, but is as seriously mentally ill as I am. I hate saying that because I don't feel seriously mentally ill, or at least how I think I should feel as a mentally ill person. So yeah, I'm going to read this. I have read this before, but I read it for NetGalley, so I just had the e-version of it, and there is an audiobook read by the author. That is probably going to be what I end up recommending, because the actual physical copy of this is kind of hard to get hold of now, and I had to get this secondhand. I ended up with two, so I need to figure out. I want to give this one away. Oh, hang on. One of them is slightly less scratched up than the other, so that's the one that I'm going to give away. The one that's less scratched up. It doesn't feel secondhand, to be honest. I think it's just maybe the way it's been stored. That's been a challenge for this book. But yeah, without further ado, let's read the book. So a quick little update. I'm not quite halfway. As you can see, I'm maybe a third, just over a third maybe. But I just need to offload a little bit. I'm on chapter 3 at the moment. The chapters are quite long with this, because it's a collection of, it bounces between like going into memories of particular moments at the moment in her childhood, and like coming back to the current time and talking these things through and analysing them and explaining what was going on in their moments. There's a lot here that I'm really connecting with, and things that I think that a lot of people do with mental illness of any description, is something that on the first page really connected with me. The quote is, "For many years leading up to that moment, I'd pushed away a big part of who I was, perhaps the most beautiful part I've now come to believe, and that was my relentless pursuit of possibilities." You, like for me, I felt like there were no possibilities for me that were more than surviving. And that, I know that sounds really dramatic, but that for a lot of people that's the reality. And I think when you have a mental illness, that is very easy to believe because it's something that you're stuck with effectively, and we don't look at treatment. You're lucky if you get good treatment, and you're lucky if you get consistent treatment. I, as with most people with mental illness, have not had consistent treatment at all. And I think because there is also the factor that you've got to give consent, and you've got to be in some ways mentally able to accept treatment, that is a blocker in a lot of ways. Here she says, "Whenever I believed in possibilities for myself in particular, there was always something to dampen the magic that came from with that question, because what if pointed to the possibility of a better future, one that I believed wholeheartedly wasn't for me. My brain, my mental illness and trauma had always proved that to be true." And that, again, like that, any quote that I give you is something that I could envision myself writing about myself. And I think that's the magic of this book, is that there's going to be so many things that connect all people, especially people with mental illness, because of the topic being mental illness. Here she says, "Was it that someone like me, someone mentally ill, would always be cast as a villain? Or was it that someone like me could be the hero, not despite or because of my mental illness, but simply as I am?" I connected with this, but for me, I feel like I just want to be someone in the middle. I don't want to be a hero. I don't want to be a villain. I just want to exist in the world and be accepted by it. And that to me would be more than enough. She also points out that stories that depict mental illness are very rarely written by people that deal with mental illness. So having fiction written by own voices is really important. She also refers to ableism as being deeply embedded in our culture, and how we as disabled and mentally ill people are expected to view ourselves through that lens. She talks about a lot about dissociation, and that is something that I really connect with as well, as I disassociate a lot. So derealization is where things don't feel real. You're still in your body, but the world around you doesn't feel real, and you feel a bit flat, a bit foggy. You can also have an aspect called depersonalization, where, and this is more, derealization is more about the world around you not feeling real, and that you as a person may not feel real. That is more referred to as depersonalization, where you don't feel real. Dissociation is more of an umbrella term that encompasses all of these different aspects. You can also have an experience where you don't feel like you're in your own body. You can't feel things. Like I always tap my nose because I can't feel my nose. It's the same if I drink alcohol, actually, weirdly. I get sort of like a really weird, it's not numb, it's like, it's really hard to describe, but it's a feeling that what you're touching isn't you, basically. If you've been around on my channel for a little while, you'll know that I have a series called Monsters, and this series mostly looks at books and authors where monsters are depicted, whether it be J.K. Rowling is the first one that comes to my head, where a lot of people feel that this person is a monster because of it. And this is a topic that's really interesting to me because as someone with mental illness, I often feel like I'm the monster in society, and that's how people perceive me or expect me to be. I really appreciate the way that KJ describes her mental illness as a shadow. I think it's like a very clear description of how it feels, because it is something that's part of you, but it feels on the outside, even though it's part of you on the inside. and it's a part of how people perceive you as well. She also talks about how monsterdom, monsterhood, etc. is simply perspective. She uses the examples, the fictional examples of Frankenstein to sort of really elevate that thought process. And it also brings in this idea of nature versus nurture. Are we really born monsters, or is it something that our environment dictates? She also talks about the grief that we go through. We grieve for the possibilities that will never come to be, the sense of life accomplishment, of being able to look back at my youth with fondness and not living with the shame of my past. I always feel like I'm trailing behind, a late comer to adulthood, because I never experienced much of a childhood. But back when I was a kid, just a little kid, before I could even acknowledge and comprehend what I was feeling, the emotion I knew how to express was anger. And over the years, that anger became my weapon. It became my monster, and everyone, including me, thought this monster and I were one and the same. These little quotes here, they're just a collection of words to some people, but to me, it's putting into words how I feel, or how I have felt. That grief is real, and like any grief in life, it's ongoing and can rear up at any time. She also uses stories and movies and things. She uses The Lord of the Rings in part, saying that the story is about small people called hobbits, a ring, and a wizard. The language is hard for me to understand, but her voice is soft, and she is so happy that her mum is reading this to her. I want to hold on to this. Maybe she will make a lattice work of her fingers and keep us here forever. The outside world is scary, scarier than orcs or a black tower capped by an eye wreathed in flames. The monsters outside my house, the ones in the schoolyard, they look just like those who aren't monsters. Those monsters have regular faces and they smile like I want to, but if I look closely, their smiles always make my skin cold. That low-level evilness is all people are capable of. She also talks about how her own mother had mental illness as well. So she suspects that her mother, now she suspects that her mother had DID, which is dissociative personality disorder. People used to call it multiple personalities. Having a parent with mental illness and you also feeling and learning that you have mental illness, it kind of adds to that inescapable, this is your lot kind of feeling, that you should just accept it and that this is all you're good for, basically. And it really encourages you to stay stuck in it, and not necessarily, it makes it even harder to fight for yourself and to move forward in any real sort of way. There's another moment where she explains how another kid in her class was consistently calling her names, and then one day she just had enough and ended up stabbing her pencil into this kid's hand. And how her and her shadow were laughing at it. She was sent to the principal's office, another silent ride home, in trouble, etc. However, nothing is broached about this consistent name calling, as much as there's no, like, it's not saying that the reaction was acceptable. It's saying that you are instantly held to a higher standard, whether people perceive you to be mentally ill or whether you actually have mental illness. In this instance, this was a child, so with no mental illness diagnosis as yet, but that higher expectation is still put in place, because the behaviour is scarier. And this continues on in adulthood. I experienced it quite recently myself in a different sort of context. And it wasn't like name calling, it was just like a belittling experience, and it was consistent. Obviously, as an adult, you're able to call people out on things, but that higher expectation of how I was supposed to behave was in place in that situation as it was in this situation. And I think that reading this really helped me to understand that, and to be able to forgive myself for my flaws enough to see the situation a little bit more in perspective. When you have a mental illness, you struggle to see the magic in the world, which is why I think a lot of people with mental illness retreat into fictional worlds, because it's easy to see the magic there because it's depicted in a very obvious sort of way. And when you have a mental illness, you need some sort of level of assistance to see the magic in the real world, especially as you retreat further and further into fictional worlds. It's such a vast experience that I struggle, as you can tell, I struggle to put into words, and this book does it so well. She also talks about something else that I have been thinking about a lot in the last couple of years, how mental illness is becoming more and more acceptable in society. However, it's certain mental illnesses that are deemed more acceptable than others, and it's only acceptable to a certain point. We're allowed to be mentally ill as long as we don't show that we're mentally ill, and people don't have to deal with the fallout of it. We're told we should talk more, we should bring people into our worlds, but then when we do, people run away afraid. So it's kind of, it's one of them things that maybe if we're talking about it more, we can understand better, but maybe in formats like this might help more because it isn't as confrontational. You don't have to necessarily deal with me in a moment of crisis, or deal with extreme emotions from me, unless you're one of my friends, in which case you might have to, sorry about that, but then I would deal with it if it's you. So it's kind of one of them things that we have to learn to let it go both ways, you know. It is something that you're always afraid of people finding out about you, is that it's easy to forget that the mental illness is just one part of you, and that there's more for you to give than just that. So it is something that you feel almost like if you don't tell people about it, you're a fraud, and not being true. But then if you do, you run the risk of being rejected. So it's kind of, it's a double-edged sword in that respect. It's this idea that having the experiences I had as a child automatically decide who I'm going to be as an adult and the actions that I'll take. And it's really hard to have that, not only have other people view you that way, but more importantly, to view yourself that way, because you're constantly on your guard to watch for declines, to watch for moments of where you lose control, and you're fearful of becoming this monster that you think is somehow inevitable. Trauma is also often misunderstood as only being an event or series of events. This isn't entirely true. While these events usually need to happen for trauma to occur, trauma is actually the experience of those events and subsequent processing. How one person experiences a traumatic event can be entirely different from how someone else might, and children are particularly vulnerable given how formative those years are psychologically and neurophysiologically. So, for example, I'm one of 4 children. We all were raised in an abusive household, but we all have suffered in different ways, if you like, and dealt with things in different ways and moved forward through life in very different ways. She also talks about gender, which is an important conversation for me to be having, and this quote here really is special to me. While I don't identify as trans, I am well aware of the harm language such as Rowling's causes. I have often questioned my own gender. I've never really felt male or female. I struggle to use they them pronouns. I also struggle to use she her pronouns. I have for many years withheld my own complex feelings about my gender. It wasn't until a friend introduced me to the concept of gender fluidity and helped me to see that gender is a spectrum on which most people fluctuate that I felt something fall into place. Sometimes I think of myself as a woman, sometimes I think of myself as not having a gender, and sometimes I feel masculine, but not a man. But how is all of this performed? Does this mean that one day I'll wear floaty dresses and lipstick and the next I'll wear cargo pants and boots? The answer to which is neither. I'd much rather wear pyjamas. Okay, so I have finished this book. I think I mentioned before that it's a reread for me, and honestly, the first time I read this, it really uplifted me and made me feel seen and heard and like I wasn't alone, and all these amazing feelings that I had last time, that I literally put the book down last time, put my head down and sobbed my heart out. I'm not even kidding, to the point that Matt looked around his computer screen and was like, "You all right?" And came over and gave me a hug because I was sobbing so hard. It was everything that I needed the first time I read it. This time it fucked me up, honestly. It fucked me up. I don't know whether it was the book or just my mental health that day would have declined quickly anyway. I don't know. I really struggled with it this time. It was hard to get through. It's hard sometimes to see your own stuff on page. It's hard to... It's not like you don't feel or know any of this about yourself. It's much more that you don't think about everything all of the time. You think about what you need to think about right now, kind of thing. What you need to do to get through this day or this moment. You don't think about... at least for me anyway, I'm saying this like I'm talking for all people with mental illness. That is not true. I'm talking from my perspective only. So please ignore my not great use of language when I keep saying we or you. Sometimes I do that more to make myself feel comfortable and take spread some of the ownership of it, I guess. Not so much that I've heard other people say these things. I do think it's a great book. I haven't changed my mind on that. I will pop on the screen my original review of it because I do think that was probably the most accurate. I think the most people probably don't reread the way that I reread. Especially not with intense stuff like this. Honestly, now I'm questioning why I picked this. There's a few books I could have picked. But I think because in here she at some point was diagnosed with BPD. It turned out to be a wrong diagnosis, which is very common and could happen to me. I could change teams at some point and a new team diagnoses me differently, which is another aspect of mental illness that we have to take into consideration, is that diagnosis, although it is with you for life, it'll always be on my record as that. If another doctor comes along and says, no, I think this is more bipolar. This cover is just amazing, isn't it, really? Look at that holographic sitch. So easy to distract me. Anyway, that's not why we're here. Okay, so the final aspect that I do want to talk about that's covered in this book is she talks about how doctors and mental health teams often treat people with mental illness. It's actually kind of rare in my experience to come across a doctor or mental health team member who still talks to you like a human. You're very much seen as at best something to be pitied, and at worst mud on your shoe, or poop on your shoe. So yeah, it is very much you're spoken to a lot of the time, and you're only expected to talk when you have a direct question, and even then you're not supposed to go into any major detail. You just need to give them as close to a yes or no answer as you can. Even with open questions, you need to keep it limited because probably for lots of reasons, but that has been my experience so far. My psychiatrist did change a few months ago due to my previous psychiatrist going on long-term sick, but this was great news for me, not so much for her, but and I hope she's fine, but my new psychiatrist is very much the kind of doctor who will ask questions and actually want to know the answers. He seems to work much more collaboratively with me, and that's only been a benefit to the situation, honestly. My last psychiatrist was afraid of letting me try things or do things that could potentially lead to a decline in my mental health. So when I wanted to change medications or wanted to try a different therapy or have a surgery, a couple of years ago I decided to have quite a major surgery, and I needed to get the okay from my psychiatrist to say that currently I was stable. That's all she needed to say, and she very much put a lot of roadblocks up, to the point where it was literally the day before my scheduled surgery when she finally sort of gave in and gave the wording that was required, despite the fact that I had been stable for several months at that point, with no need for any interventions from her other than to check in and make sure that I'm still taking my meds and that everything's okay. So there is a lot of fear within the way that you're treated, which doesn't help anything, because at the end of the day, I'm still a human. I'm still capable of a lot more, and I think I've proved that to myself, thankfully. I don't know how many others I've proved it to, but at some point the tide's got to change, right? As I hope, and hopefully at some point people will start seeing that, and the more people like me that speak up and share their experiences, hopefully it can be shown, the realities of mental illness can be shown a little bit more, and the possibilities. Don't quit on people because they've got mental illness. Things can change. Things do change with the right support, and mental illness is one aspect. You wouldn't give up on someone for having fibro. You wouldn't give up on someone for you wouldn't assume that they were gonna do harm for having cancer. You know, it's no different. It's an illness. The illness just happens to be in the brain, and yeah, I hope that we can move towards not automatically trusting people, but allowing there to be a door open for that trust to develop. Because at the end of the day, bad people are everywhere, just like good people are everywhere, and it doesn't matter if you have a mental illness or not. You could still be someone that's not particularly safe for each person. So it's not that I'm sitting here saying you should, flowers and rainbows and all of this, and automatically trust everyone. No, that's the mistake I've made too many times in my life, honestly, and I wouldn't recommend it. Honestly, I think somewhere in the middle is probably appropriate here. Having that door open, accepting that people need time to show who they are, and don't forget all of the good things that someone does just because they have a bad day or a bad moment. That's what I would like to see happen a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to start waffling on. Hopefully this hasn't been too intense for you as it has been for me. I came very close to not posting this, honestly. We're not there yet for people to not be afraid, and ultimately that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of people turning their back on me for this reason only, for things that I've said in this video. So yeah, it's just one of them. If people are going to turn their backs, they're going to turn their backs. Anyway, Matt has recorded something. I don't know what he said in this until I edit this video. So I thought I'd pop it in because sometimes it's useful to hear the experience of a partner as well with these things, because at the end of the day, all illness, whether it's physical, mental, or a combination, affect the whole family quite profoundly at times. So yeah, I thought I'd pop his viewpoint in here as well, just for a little change up, and also because I know everyone loves Matt as much as I do. Not as much as I do. No, that's not true. That is not true. No one could love him as much as I do.
Hi everyone. A lot of you already know me, but for those that don't, I'm Matt, and I'm Hermie's husband. So Hermie and I have been married for over 12 years now, and been together for coming up 15 years, and it's been a roller coaster, but I wouldn't change it for the world. Loved every second. And Hermie's asked me to chat about what it's like to be married with someone who has the conditions that Hermie has. So Hermie has, as they've said, has emotionally unstable personality disorder, or EUPD, and fibromyalgia, which is effectively chronic pain and fatigue that's as a result of that pain. And I would not want to diminish how hard it is for them in the slightest, or to suggest that it hasn't been hard for me as well. It isn't hard for me now to handle those things, but there's also it's part of who Hermit is. It's part of their personality. For all the challenges that are there, it makes them who they are, and that's the person that I fell in love with and still am in love with. So I wouldn't change any of that. That being qualified, obviously there's things that are different from someone who doesn't have those conditions. And I will say, for clarity, and something that Hermit will have talked about extensively, is that I am autistic. I found out I was autistic quite late in life. I was in my 30s. How it impacts me is primarily in social communication, in understanding cues when talking to people. On a sensory level, it's primarily to do with noise. And how that impacts my relationship with Hermit is if things get very difficult for them, and sometimes they can spiral and react in a way that is unexpected, could be seen as irrational, and part of it is because of the way that they're experiencing it means that they are prone to lash out in some situations. And how I react to that, unfortunately, is that in those high pressure situations, in those high emotion situations, I really struggle to process what's being said. So I hear that as white noise and my brain scrambles. So much in the way as Hermit gets the brain fog, the fibro fog that's associated with fibromyalgia, I get that in almost the worst times when there's disagreements, or when Hermit is very emotional and trying to express that to me. Sometimes I will go very quiet, and that doesn't help the situation. That heightens the emotion almost, because it feels like I'm not listening or I'm not reacting, when actually I'm just unable to process it in that moment. In terms of how it impacts my life, it's and our relationship. A lot of it is about being very aware of what is emotion in the moment, what is maybe the response of somebody with a condition that causes them to process emotions differently and react very strongly to things, and what's the kind of the underlying things behind that. So it's I always try and rationalize everything, and try and rationalize everything for Hermit as well. That's something that I'm very, I will always fall back on over rationalizing everything to try and pick things out piece by piece, and I try and be that voice of reason for Hermit as well. It's there to try and look at the inputs to a situation, try and see what the causes are of a certain feeling, and I try and remain very calm while doing that. I think being a calming presence, being a consistent presence, helps with that. Certainly, if I was the kind of person who escalated back, who also had very emotional outbursts on rare occasions that I do have very emotional outbursts back, that's never a positive outcome. On the fibromyalgia side, it's being aware of how that limits Hermit and what they do every day. I act as Hermit's carer in a lot of situations, so particularly things around the doctors who've not treated Hermit very well, and that leads them to really disassociate almost with that situation. Physically, to try and make sure that Hermit's able to use the the spoons that they have, the physical capabilities that they have for the things that matter the most. Spending time with our daughter, with be able to go out, be able to exercise, and be able to be their own person. And sometimes that means trotting up and down the stairs 5 times a day to get food and drinks, and sometimes helping Hermit in and out the shower on the days that they're not able to get out of bed at all. Be able to do that. I take on a lot of the house caring responsibilities, and I do that happily because I think it allows Hermit then to concentrate on things that actually are important there. I think that Hermit is incredibly brave and incredibly emotionally intelligent and empathetic with everybody who has a condition that affects their daily life, and they spend the majority, I think, of their effort trying to help others. And the downside of their condition is that sometimes that doesn't come across in the way that it should. I think the people that know them know that Hermit is like that, but it's a cruel world that will have certain individuals who don't take the time to understand these conditions and react very negatively for no reason. And that's frustrating. I find that very frustrating. Hope that this was useful. Hope that there's footage that you actually want to use in this. And if you don't, then don't. But
thank you for hanging out with me today. And love you, bye.
Bye, love you.
Hi. Okay. Oh, of course. It would be 3 p.m. right now. "12 is such a long time." Not even. No, shut up. Let me just get a fucking thingy up on the screen because it's easier than trying to post shit out of my brain. Because I am cool, obviously. Oh, am I filming? I am recording. Yeah, I have been for the last minute. Of course I have.
I'm a book hermit, part of the BookTube crew, sharing my thoughts, connecting me and you. With every page a new adventure awaits, a community bound by